And now, once again, Richard Thomas.
Something that's high on everyone's list of things to be thankful for is good health. And you learn to appreciate it even more when it's taken away from you or from someone you love. In our next story, a young child is struck down by a deadly disease and given only hours to live. But during those brief hours, something happens that's more powerful than any disease.
I'm not feeling so great.
Yeah? What's going on?
On an evening in October 1998, 10-year-old Stephanie Sumner began complaining of not feeling well. Her mother, Melissa, didn't think there was much cause for alarm.
Yeah, maybe a hot bath and a good night's rest.
Okay.
Okay.
We just assumed that she had the flu. So I gave her a Tylenol, put her in a bathtub full of warm water, tried to soothe the aches and pains, and put her to bed.
Mom!
By the next morning, Stephanie's condition had gotten much worse.
Sweetie, take a deep breath. Honey.
She started pushing on her chest, telling me that she couldn't breathe. And for something that just seemed to be the flu, it seemed so serious now.
Tom! Tom!
I immediately called my husband and told him there was something wrong, and then we called an ambulance.
The medics had no clue. All they basically did was take her vitals.
Number 2, what do we got, Patrick? 88.
By the time Stephanie arrived in the emergency room, her blood pressure and heart rate were alarmingly high. At first, doctors could offer no explanation.
And that really frightened me because I'm thinking, okay, these medical people don't even know what's going on.
Eventually, Stephanie was diagnosed with a rare form of meningitis, a bacterial infection that was rapidly attacking her brain.
It's a horrible thing when your daughter is a perfectly normal 10-year-old, and the next minute, a doctor is telling you that she may not make it within the next 24 hours.
Stephanie's infection was quick and deadly, and as soon as news of her condition reached her school, the principal, Mrs. Poole, paid a visit to the hospital.
When I first saw Stephanie, she was a little lethargic, feverish. Hi, Stephanie. How you feeling, babe?
Sorry, I'm not at school.
That's all right. She was looking up at me, and very poignantly, she said, Mrs. Poole, I love you. Stephanie, I love you. And I could feel the tears coming as I was trying to stay in control because it was obvious there was something very wrong here. And when I saw Stephanie next that afternoon, her body had transformed and deteriorated to such an extent that she was unrecognizable. It was a sight that I probably will carry in my heart forever, of such a beautiful, angelic, wonderful little girl turned into a creature that is hardly human looking in the span of a few short hours. I want to thank you for coming in this evening. I know.
Later that day, Mrs. Poole gathered her staff together to explain that one of their students was dangerously ill and might not live through the night.
I could not imagine what words I was going to use to share any hope with the staff, because we were looking at a situation that indeed was very hopeless. It was the most difficult task I think I have ever faced as a professional and as a person.
Well, what can we do?
I'm not sure.
Mrs. Poole, I think that we can pray.
One of the teachers, Sue Cosper, suggested they end the meeting with a prayer for Stephanie and her family.
Anyone who would like, and if you would not like to join me for prayer, you may leave. I kept standing there, and finally Mrs. Poole said, "Well, when are you going to pray?" And I said, "Well, I was giving people a chance to leave." She said, "No one's leaving." That was overwhelming.
Everyone joined hands, and Sue Cosper led them in a heartfelt prayer for the little girl fighting for her life.
May we bow our heads in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father.
And it was quite an emotional event for, I believe, every person who was present in that room.
Miraculously, Stephanie survived that first night in the hospital, but her condition was about to take a serious turn for the worse. The dramatic conclusion, when it's a miracle, continues. When 10-year-old Stephanie Sumner was rushed into the emergency room, the doctors were at first baffled by her condition. But soon, it became apparent that she was suffering from a deadly infection that was destroying her body. Dr. Chuck Dietzen explains.
Stephanie developed some significant problems where suddenly she starts sending little blood clots out into the distal arteries in the fingertips and down into her leg, and eventually these fingers are going to have to be amputated. And they had to amputate her left leg below the knee.
It's something that every one of us in life, when you're born normal, you take it for granted. You just assume that your leg's always going to be there. You assume that you're always going to have those fingers, you know.
Stephanie's life hung in the balance for quite a while, and I know there was a great number of people who initiated prayer for her.
For all the months that Stephanie spent in the hospital, the prayer group continued to meet every morning before school. And their devotion and dedication to saving this young girl's life quickly spread into the classrooms, where students and their parents began a campaign to raise awareness of Stephanie's plight by selling blue ribbons to be worn in her honor.
Although you know your kid is liked by people, you don't know how well they're liked until something like that happens, to bring everyone together to focus on your child. And you realize, you know, that they're special not only to you, but to everyone else.
Soon, prayers and get well cards were being received from around the world.
There were schools from as far as Kentucky that were sending boxes of letters from preschools. There was prayers going out all across the internet. It went as far as Ireland and Germany.
They were just also caring for Stephanie, all their prayers and their concern. We even had kids calling the hospital, asking if they could come up, and of course they couldn't, but it didn't stop them from caring.
And slowly, their care and concern became part of a larger miracle. Stephanie had beaten the odds and survived the fatal disease.
And when things started to brighten up, to look better, we could finally see a little light at the end of the tunnel. Knowing how devastating this virus is, I mean, you can slowly see a miracle happening.
Okay, here we go. You ready for this? Yeah.
After more than a 6-month absence, Stephanie finally returned to school in the spring of 1999. Her 5th grade teacher, Miss Ropa, helped wheel her into her classroom of friends.
Hey, you guys, look who's back.
They were all over. All the kids were really wanting to be helpful and asking if there was anything they could do for her. It was really nice, you know, to see her go back and to be a normal little 10-year-old again.
Today, Stephanie wears a prosthetic leg and leads a full, active life like any child her age. Her parents are constantly amazed by her miraculous recovery from this devastating illness.
I don't think it's just one miracle that God preserved her life. He preserved her spirit and her mind. To watch Stephanie play with her brothers, finally after such a long time being separated, it's wonderful.
I believe that God heard our prayers, and God knows there's no reason to quit, ever, on life.
Undoubtedly, we believe in the power of prayer. we saw it work, not for just a day, but for days that ended up being months, and then there was victory.
The power of prayer is just exactly what it says, power. And if there's anybody that doesn't believe it, come talk to me. I can tell you a little bit about it.
After we finished shooting this story, we met with Stephanie and asked her what she was most thankful for. Her answer? For being alive and having the parents I have.